It always interests me how our lives intersect. Back in the 2000s, I used to read a column in the Chattanooga Times Free Press, although it may have been under a different name then, by a young woman named Dana Shavin. 20 years later, I find out she's working at the Creative Arts Guild of Dalton, where I now live. Because of that role, her extensive writing, and her visual arts experience, she's a perfect guest for this podcast. And I get to meet her after all this time. Stick around and listen. Dana Shavin, welcome to Dialogues with Creators, which you certainly are.
Thank you, Barbara. I am so excited to be here. I'm truly honored that you asked me to do this. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're the perfect guest. This is because you live creativity and you work for the Creative Arts Guild.
I do.
Yeah. Could you get us started by telling us how you became a newspaper columnist, especially since I believe your training was in psychology?
Yep. Well, it's kind of a funny story. My training is in psychology. So I graduated after a very extensive college career that involved a whole lot of stuff that I'll talk about later. But anyway, finally graduated with a degree in psychology. Then I went and got my master's in clinical psych from, at the time, it was called Augusta College, then Augusta State College. Now it's Augusta University. So I got my master's degree in psychology. And when I completed that, I moved to Chattanooga because my family is actually from here. My dad was born in Chattanooga. My grandparents came here from Russia and settled in Chattanooga. So my dad was born here. And so we would come back and forth to Chattanooga to visit my relatives. And I can remember thinking when I was a kid and we would go around the river and I would say, nobody could ever be depressed in Chattanooga. And so when I finished my degree, I was kind of depressed. And so I'm like, I'm going to move to Chattanooga, so I'll feel so much better. Anyway, I moved here. I took a job at Johnson Mental Health Center. It's now called Volunteer Behavioral Health. And I was there for, all told, for about, I think 7 or 8 years, something like that. But during sort of after I left that, I burned out rather quickly and I turned to art and I started doing pottery and I started painting and things like that. And so I joined In-Town Gallery in Chattanooga. And one day I was hanging my art at River Street Deli, which is there in Coolidge Park. He used to let local artists hang art in there and sell art out of there. That was Bruce Weiss. And so I was hanging my art in there and somebody came in to have lunch and she said, oh gosh, I wish I could do what you do. And I said, well, what do you do? She said, well, I write for the paper. And I said, oh my gosh, I wish I could do what you do, because I had been writing forever and ever and ever, but never, not professionally. And so she said, well, it just so happens I heard that Mark Kennedy is talking about starting a rotation of columnists for the paper. And she said, you should really give him a call. And I did. I actually emailed him and I attached some clips from some things that some personal essays I had written. And I mean, the rest is history. He got in touch. I joined a rotation of 4 columnists. The column at the time was called My Life. Mm-hmm. And it featured 4 women, a 20-year-old, a 30-year-old, a 40-year-old, and a 50-year-old.
Yeah.
I was in the 40 slot. And I remember after the first year of doing it, I loved it so much. I mean, I loved it so much. I was once a month on Sundays in the lifestyle section. And I remember at the end of the first year going, oh my gosh, I hope they renew us. I hope I get to do it for another year. Well, that was 25 years ago and I'm still doing it.
Oh, wow.
So all the other columnists have come and gone. They don't call it My Life anymore. I'm just in there. I'm just hanging out in there, somewhere in the lifestyle section or thereabouts. Every third Sunday. Every third Sunday, somewhere in the lifestyle section. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember reading that, and I remember one of the girls had a small baby.
Mary Fortune.
Yes, Mary Fortune, and you, and then there was an older lady that she was kind of a firecracker, as I recall.
Yes, at Jan Galetta.
Yeah, it's Jan Galetta.
Uh-huh. Her name just came to me because I was trying to think of her name earlier.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jan Galetta, and she was great. And I don't remember the name of the 20-year-old, but yeah.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. I used to read you faithfully because I read those columns. Was it on a Sunday it came out?
Yeah, it was on Sundays. We were all on rotating Sundays.
Yeah. Yeah. And I used to get the paper on Sundays and spend the time reading it. That's back in the day.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
People did that. Okay. So that was interesting. So you started with the visual arts and then moved to the publishing.
Yes and no.
Okay.
I mean, I've been writing since I was a little kid. My sister gave me a journal, a little diary when I was, 12 years old or something. And she said, write everything down that happens to you. And so so I did. Like I started keeping a diary, and it grew to a journal, and I kept that for years and years and years. Mm-hmm. But actually, while I was still at Joe Johnson, I started writing for the free rags around town. Like just something called Brevis, and I started writing for Brevis. Mark Northern was the editor at the time. He was super kind to me and brought me on. So I would write for them, I think maybe even once a week, these personal essays. I wrote under a pseudonym. My pseudonym, I'm going to out myself now. My pseudonym was Jessie Gold. And I did that for a while. And then Brevis turned into Enigma. And so I wrote for Enigma for a while. And then Enigma went away. And something called Chattanooga Outlook showed up that was run by a guy named Robert Phillips. And I started writing for him. And I think I actually started to get paid a little bit at that point. Mm-hmm. And then I did that for about a year, I guess, and they folded. And when they folded, I was so terribly upset. But that was when I ended up going to the Chattanooga Times Free Press. Mm-hmm. But during that time, so right around 1993, I guess, was when I started with the pottery, and then I left my mental health career because the pottery and then later the painting was taking off. Mm. And so once I was able to establish myself at art festivals as a painter, and I was making enough money to support myself and for a little while to support my husband also, then I started looking more seriously toward the writing, because the writing was always my first love. Mm. And so I started submitting to literary journals, and I started to have some success with that. And I started doing a few readings here and there. And then I started thinking about writing a book, which I know we'll talk about later. So the art came first as far as being able to support me, but I had always been a writer. Writing is the wallpaper of my life.
That's neat. Can I just step back? You said your grandparents are from Russia?
Uh-huh.
How did they get here? Yes. How did they get to Chattanooga?
That's a very good question. What I know is that my grandfather fled the Tsar's army when he was 19. Oh. And I think he stowed away like on a ship and came here. I think they had some family who were already here. Yeah. And I guess they came through Ellis Island, but had some family that was down here. And so they ended up down here with like a plumbing and dry goods business is what they started in. Oh, so he was way back then. If he was in the Tsar's army, that would have been pre-revolution. It was a very, very long time ago. So my dad is no longer living. My dad would be 100 now. Oh, okay. Yeah. So, wow. What a story. Yeah. I'm always surprised that people, I mean, I know people emigrated everywhere, but it just, Chattanooga always seems so out of the way compared to like New York or, the coast or something. But right. Yeah, it is an unusual place to wind up. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a great story. So back when you were writing the column, how did you get ideas? Well, I would turn to my husband and I would say, honey, what's up for me this month? And I still do that. I still say, honey, what's up for me this month? My columns were always, they're little personal essays. And so I was always writing about stuff that was happening to me. And so I would think back over over the last month. And I would think about, whatever. I mean, just whatever had happened. Had I had an argument with my mom? Had I gotten a new dog? Whatever had happened that sort of had heat for me, that had emotion behind it. It had to have some emotion behind it in order for me to be interested enough in exploring it. And what happened over time, a couple of things happened over time, is I started to understand the personal essay form better and better. And I started to understand that people, I'm not, I might sound like a narcissist because I say, my topics are always about me. But as a personal essayist, your topics are always about you, but they're also about something larger,
right?
If they're successful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to understand that people weren't going to just be interested in writing about the fact that I got a dog because I got a dog, or I had an argument with my mom because, it had to be, there's a dog behind you that I'm, which
my dog.
Oh my goodness, that's so funny. It had to be that, yes, I had an argument with my mom, but what's the larger story about navigating a relationship, as you are aging and as your parent is aging? So I started to realize that all of my columns needed to have an eye toward what's the larger story here? What's the bigger issue? What's the universal angle?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think they got a little richer and a little more in depth because of that. At the same time, interestingly, they started to get a little bit funnier. And that wasn't really where I was trying to go. But I think that as I got happier and I started to enjoy my life more, and I was enjoying being a writer and an artist more than I had enjoyed my mental health career, there was more of a lightness to me. And I started to see the humor in a lot more things. And I started to be infused in my columns. And so I was sort of surprised. The first award I won, it was not the Green Eye Shades. It was not through the Times Free Press. It was something else. I can't remember what it was, but it was a more general press association award. And it was for humor. And I hadn't entered it in a humor contest. And I thought, oh, I guess I'm a humor columnist. So I started to identify as that. And then when I started to submit my work to like the Green Eye Shades, the journalism awards, I submitted under the humor, rubric. And so that was what they became.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't ever think of you as like Irma Bombeck or
no.
or Louis Brizard. I just thought it was personal. So you would call that creative nonfiction?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Did you have other roles at the paper?
I did not. More recently, like last year, the year before, I did a little bit of food writing for them. They had lost their food writer. He had moved on to another. It's where they were between food writers, and so I picked up a few things that way. And so I wrote a little bit. And Mark Kennedy would interview me here and there. Or I would write something. Like I was writing for Chatter magazine off and on, which is a part of the Times Free Press. Yeah, but not on a regular basis, more freelance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's fascinating. Okay. So what were your favorite topics to write about?
Well, I have to say, I'm always my favorite topic, followed by that old line, but I'm not a narcissist. Anything can be my favorite topic if I can see a connection to the larger world.
Yeah.
And absolutely everything has a connection to the larger world. So, I mean, anything, if you delve and you scratch deeply enough, under the surface, even I love writing about my dogs, for instance.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But, even that is, it's a larger conversation about commitment and responsibility.
Uh-huh.
And discipline.
Yeah. I work with a lot of writers, and I have I so-called lead a writers group, although I'm not a very good leader of it. That's part of the guild. And we meet in Northwest Georgia. We meet up in Fort Oglethorpe. And it's been going on for 15 years almost now. And we've had people come and go, and we've had a core of people who stay pretty long. And most of us write fiction, but some people want to do more creative nonfiction. And I'm trying to learn more about the memoir mode. the Guild had a really good program by Margaret Broblier in January, and I got to know her, and she was on my podcast. We've become friends, and she's she's publishing a memoir that should be out very soon. And so I've been trying to learn more about memoir because people misunderstand it. I think sort of like what you're saying is they think it's they said, well, I did this, I did this, I did this. Well, no, that's not
it at all.
Yeah.
That's a diary entry.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, some people that I've worked with, they want it's more about their life instead of the connection with the reader. Right. And there has to be that, although it has to be about you. And people want to read memoir. It's a very, very popular genre right now. But so that and all that to say, I want to kind of segue to your own memoir, The Body Tourist, and having read the reviews and information about that book, and having spent some time studying the genre myself, although not as much as I would like, and I'm fascinated with your achievement there. And I want to say because I'm trying to write my memoir. But True Confessions, and I have a lot of things to write about that I think would connect with people, but I find it difficult. I find it for a few reasons. One is that I write fiction and nonfiction. I don't really want to talk about myself that much. And because, and secondly, because some of the stuff it's not, tragically, horribly dark, but it's dark. It's not upbeat at all. From my childhood and some other stuff. And that sounds like I'm being an anti-narcissist there or something. I don't mean it to be, reverse narcissist. But I just find it hard to sustain that memory because it's not fun. It's not, I'm just struggling with it. Like I just write little bits and pieces. And even those I'm reluctant to share with people because they seem so, negative. So I'm fascinated with people who can write a memoir because I'm struggling with it so much myself. It's easier for me to just construct a story about other people for some reason. So can you tell us what your memoir process is about, how you see the memoir process, and share as much of your own story as you feel comfortable? And I'll just let you talk here for a while.
Sure. I want to respond to absolutely everything you just said. But my memoir process was when I was, late 30s or something. I was reading something or other. And of course, I had always written personal essay and all of that. But I read something that said, what is it that you're not writing about? Write about that. And I mean, instantly, I went, oh my God, I've never written about my eating disorder history. Like all these years, I'd never like delved into it and written about it. And I started like that hour writing a book about it. And it was, so what a memoir is, it's not, people talk about their memoirs, plural. It's not, a memoir is really an encapsulated period of time in your life that you have chosen to write about. It's not your whole autobiography. It's not I was born and then up until, what happened yesterday. You're choosing a period of time in your life that you want to examine in great depth. And if you're not willing to examine it in great depth, then there is no point in even beginning to write about it. So I worked with a lot of mentors during the time of writing my, first I wrote it all the way through. And then I got a mentor through the Writers Studio in New York City. And it was an online conversation. My mentor was named Therese Iben, and she was magnificent. I mean, she was just really so great. But one of the things she really taught me, I would send her like 20 pages at a time, and I'd be like, oh, I know this is so good. She's going to love this. She's going to tell me this is great. And she would say, and I cannot tell you how many times this happened, she would say, well, this is good as a placeholder. And what she meant was, you're going to rewrite every single bit of this, but it's a nice start. And I did a lot of crying during this process, let me tell you, of writing, not because of what I was writing about, but just the writing of it was so hard. But what she was trying to make me understand is that when you write memoir, it is like holding a stone in your hand and turning it over and over and over and examining every single inch of that stone from every single angle. And if you're not willing to do that, then all you're doing is writing toward your own prefab conclusions about your life. And nobody, that's not interesting, and that's not taking you anywhere. One of the questions I think that you had talked about was my definition of curiosity. I mean, of creativity, which I would say is really curiosity. You have to have an intense curiosity about that period of time you're writing about in order to write effectively about it. But the other thing you have to have is distance. You have to have distance and perspective. And so, like, when you talk about writing about these dark places in your life, I wonder if you need to take a large step back to where you can look at it and write about it with a great deal more perspective. Because if you're writing about it from too close in, then it's like reliving the trauma. And it's very hard to get to anywhere new in your thinking about what happened to you if you're in that trauma, if you're too close to the fire. You know what I mean? So you got to step back from the fire. So my memoir was about the 5 years between when I got out of the hospital for anorexia treatment. I was, how old was I? I was 20. And then through about the age of 26 or so. So it covered basically my whole mental health career. So I started working at a halfway house for alcohol and drug dependent people when I was 21 and basically just out of the hospital. I think I might have weighed 93 pounds at the time, and I'm 5'8".
Yeah.
But here I presented myself as, I know how to fix you because I have fixed myself. Well, what I learned over the course of the next 5 years and over the course especially of writing my memoir is that you don't step out of the hospital recovered. You don't step out of an AA session, non-alcohol, you are, well, of course you're on a journey. I mean, that's kind of a cliche, but you are in the process of becoming, of finding out who you are and why you did the things you did and how you ended up with the problems you had. And so what was interesting, one of the most interesting things for me as I wrote about that period of time of supposedly being recovered, but not really being recovered, the whole time I was working as a mental health therapist, basically, is I was moving from house to house to house. I had 3 big dogs and I was always looking for better and better places to rent. Except what I was renting were actually horrible places. So my first apartment had no furniture. And the second place I lived had a roof that caved in. And the third place had a giant hole. So all of these houses were in some way really metaphors for my body and for the place I was in my life. I didn't know that until I wrote this memoir. I could not see that until I stepped back and I turned that stone over and over and over again. And I was able to see that as I was gradually getting better, my houses were gradually getting better until finally, by the end, I moved to a horse farm, and it's just beautiful. And I'm living in a trailer, but it's a functional trailer. It's fully functional. It has heat. It has a roof. It has windows that open and close. It has doorknobs, which none of my other places had. The process of recovery and the process of memoir both are processes of discovery. That's probably the best way to say it. Yeah.
You mentioned you had a mentor. Excuse me. I'll have this cut. Was that something you got or that a publisher gave you?
No. I got that myself.
Okay.
Yeah, I got that myself. I've had a lot of mentors. In fact, we just had a workshop at the Guild where we were talking about establishing a writing practice. And one of the things I said to people was, if you can afford to get a mentor, because A, accountability, but B, somebody to give you ongoing feedback about your work is incredibly valuable. So I had a lot of people over the years. Some were better than others, but I learned something from all of them. It was a great process. And I really, I feel like I really educated myself by doing that. I didn't get an MFA. I didn't go to college in creative writing. And so it was up to me to educate myself about writing. And that was how I did it.
hmm Well, I have opinions about MFAs and everything, but that's another issue. There's they get a lot of people fussing about them, but
Yes.
yeah. So I really appreciate you talking about that memoir process because it is far more emotionally draining than someone thinks.
Yes.
And I tell people I think they're older people and they just want to have their life story put into some form. And I I tell them, okay, well, if that's all you want to do, for your family, that's one thing. But if you're serious about anybody else reading this, it's going to be a much more difficult process than just saying what you did each day or
It is.
talking about certain things. And I tell them, I said, they're more likely if you just do an oral history and film it to watch it
Right.
to read something because people aren't as much on reading now as they used to be. So just
I think
film yourself.
I think what the other thing people don't understand about personal essay, creative nonfiction, memoir is, and I'm teaching a class on this weekend at Meacham, as a matter of fact, is that it's not enough to tell the story. You have to tell why the story matters.
Yeah.
You've got to connect those two things. Otherwise, if you're just telling the story, you're just telling a timeline. If you don't connect it to why somebody should care about it, if you don't make it somehow universal, then you have wasted your time, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you've got to do the work of finding that meaning. You've got to do that kind of work. And that's when it's draining. It's not that particularly draining just to write a timeline, but to do it right and make the connection to why people should care about your story. That's the craft of it. That's when you're really crafting something.
And you might have to do some research. I mean, you obviously had a background in psychology, but, for the thing that I want to write about, I would have to do it's about a condition. I would have to do more research about it because I don't understand it, what little bit I do. So, and I don't think they wouldn't, if I don't understand it, nobody else would understand it.
But I think that's a great thing to do. And there's a lot of that kind of writing out there now. And I personally love that. I mean, readers love to learn something.
Right.
And so if you can bring information about this condition, you bring the personal and the science to it in a way that's understandable, that's gold. I think that's writing gold. Yeah.
So a book is a different animal than shorter pieces. How did you meet that challenge? From a column to a book. So,
well, as my mother says, who is 90, turning 97 this year, she says, "How did I get this?" She says, "How did I get this old?" I say, "One day at a time, Mom."
Yeah,
yeah. Not that old. And that's just how I did the book. I mean, you just, that's why it's important to write about something that is interesting to you, that is going to interest you for a very long time, because you are going to be working on it for a very, very long time.
Yes.
When people bring things, to writers group, and I'm in a personal writers group also, but, they bring things, they say, "Hey, I wrote this on the way over here." It's like, no, I don't want to see what you wrote on. No, you worked on for the last 2 months. Or
that's like in my writers group, somebody brought something that was AI, and we called her out on it. It's like, what are you doing? Why are you doing?
Why?
Yeah, we don't want to read this stuff. We can go on the internet and read it.
Right.
So, you can't. Oh my, that's terrible.
And, and to your question, though, writing a book is not for everyone, and you don't have to. It doesn't have to be. Like, there are a lot of ways to be a writer. You don't have to write a, 200-page tome in order to call yourself a writer. You just don't.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody has I don't say illusion, but the idea that they've got a book in them. And I'm like, no, not necessarily.
Yeah, who was it who said everybody says they have a book in them and that's probably where it should stay? I don't remember who said that, but.
Bye. That's a good one.
Yeah.
So you excel at writing with many awards, and I will refer listeners to the show notes for your website. Did you pursue we already talked about that. You were a visual artist before you got really into writing, but you still continue with the visual art, I suppose.
I do on a very, very low level. So I still take commissions. So I do dog portraits.
Oh,
Yeah. And they're kind of funky, quirky. They're not like AKC dog portraits. They're very folk arty. And
yeah.
so I still have customers who I painted their dog, 15 years ago, who will contact me and say, well, that dog died, but we got a new one. Can you paint my new dog?
Oh,
And so I will, of course, I never tell people no. So I still do that, but I don't paint that much on my own. I actually, my latest project, the one I just finished doing, was I started building all of the houses that I wrote about in The Body Tourist in my book. So all the houses I lived in, I literally built them out of wood.
oh,
Yeah. And, roofing shingle and, actual nails and things like that. So I have a workbench in my garage and I built 12 houses. So the book doesn't cover all 12 houses, but I built 12 houses. Some of these are fantasy houses that I dreamed about during that time. Like one of them is a house that I saw that I wanted to live in during that time. So I physically built them all. And I had a show at Ava with them, I think it was last year. And I really need to get out there and see if I can. And I had an exhibit at the Guild, at the Dalton Creative Arts Guild with them also. And it's called House as Body, House as Unrequited Love.
oh. Do you, where do you live now? In Tennessee?
I live in Chattanooga on Elder Mountain.
Oh, wow. You have a long commute then to Dalton.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
Interesting. So how does the writing and the visual arts intersect for you?
The painting really did not, but the houses are really the biggest way they intersected for me. Back when I was, painting more, like when I was going to art festivals, which I did for many, many years, the painting was really a reprieve. It was like, okay, I need to get out of my head, out of this writing that I'm doing and go do that. And it was great. And I would just go do my art and, my writing could just sort of percolate, without me sitting in front of the computer. My writing mentor, Therese, used to say that I needed to stop sitting on my manuscript. And so going to do art was a great way to stop sitting on my manuscript. Mm-hmm. And then when I had painted enough for a show, I would come back to the computer and I would be fresh and I would be ready to hit it again. And I would have had some new thoughts about things. So, now I don't really paint much anymore, like I said, except for just on commission. But I go for walks and that's my away from the computer time.
Yeah. My dog walking is important. The only thing I don't like is that, I like to walk at Hague Mill Park here in Dalton, but you can't take your dog there.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. So I can't. It's like, the dog has to come first because he needs exercise.
Absolutely.
He's a Chubbs. He needs some exercise as well as I do.
That's too.
So how did the job position at the Guild come about?
Oh, gosh, that was another amazing thing. So I actually went down there to talk to them about having an exhibit of my houses in a gallery. They have a beautiful gallery at the Hill.
Yeah.
And so I went down there to talk to them about that. And as I was walking out, I noticed that they had a culinary room, like a kitchen, and it said culinary arts. And I thought, here's a place that has culinary arts, visual art, theater arts. They had dance,
yeah.
But they
and
don't
music.
have music. Yes.
Yeah.
But they don't have literary arts. What's happening here? And so I went home and I wrote up a proposal for a literary arts program. It was very robust. And everything I thought I would love to do, start a writer's group, start workshops, maybe have like 1 or 2 day conferences, bring in some younger people, maybe, literary magazine down the line, something like that. Mm-hmm. The writer's group. I think I mentioned that. And so I wrote all that up and I asked if I could talk to Amanda Brown, who's the executive director. And she said, yes. So I went down and I brought my proposal and I brought her a book. I brought her my book of columns. And she was interested in it because, they had a writers group before. They had a successful writers group before for years. And I kind of knew about it because many, many years ago, I guess I was in my very early 30s. They had something called the Butch Couch Writers Contest. And I had entered that and I had won something. So I had gone down there for an awards ceremony. And so I knew they had the Wall Street Journal. Uh-huh. So they had that for years and years. George Spence was a big part of that. And so she had been wanting to revive that. And so she was definitely on board with it. And so I started out I said, well, let's start. I'll have a reading and we'll do it in the evening. I'll get like 5 readers, 5 writers to come to the Guild in the gallery and read. And so we did that. And it was a success. A lot of the community showed up. And then we put the word out about the writers group and a lot of people were interested and it continues to grow. I think we have about 16 people in the writers group. They don't all come all the time, which is good because we couldn't do it with that many.
Right.
And then after we did that, I did that for about a year of having some readings and some different things like that. I went back to Amanda and said, how about we put a ring on it? How about, I do, a certain amount of hours at the Guild actually, for reimbursement. And she said, yes, let's make it official. And so we did. So I've been doing it officially for a year, a little over a year. Started January a year ago.
Well, that's interesting because I interviewed her for this podcast a year or so ago. It might have been 2 years ago. I'm not sure. And we did talk about that. And she did want to, she voiced at the time that she did want something in the literary arts. So that's cool. So what do you make a successful writers group?
A number of things. I think you start with people who are committed to writing, not people who like the idea of being a writer. So you want people who are already writing, who have had somewhat of a writing practice already. They don't need to be good. They just need to have been writing. Mm-hmm. So there's that. What we have is what I call a facilitated writers group. So I facilitate it. But I'm also a member of a writers group here in Chattanooga, and it's just 4 of us. And, we don't have a facilitator. We just are a group. But I think, so committed participants who agree to meet on a regular basis and then actually do. I think an understanding that for feedback to be useful, it has to be both kind and honest. So I don't mean you have to make up, kind things to say, but you need to tell what's working in someone's piece and what's not working for you. Mm-hmm. So I think those 2 things are important. I think you have to have respect. So when one person is talking, the whole group is not interrupting and saying, I don't agree with you. And we have a thing in place in both my personal group and in the Dalton group where when somebody's giving you feedback, you do not argue and you mostly stay silent. It's hard to enforce, but you mostly, stay as silent as you can.
Yeah.
I think those are the really important things. Just as important as those things is what kind of a feedback receiver you are. So I think it's very important. And I tell people all the time, you don't have to agree with the feedback you're getting, but you don't need to fight it in group. So take it with you. Think about it later. I cannot tell you how many times somebody has given me feedback in my personal group. And I've thought, oh, God, she is so wrong about that, and I take it away. And then I'm on my little walk with my dogs and I go, oh my God, she's so right about that. Mm-hmm. You have to be willing to sit with it, but you also have to be the kind of writer who is thoughtful enough and who has read enough and done enough of your own writing to know when feedback really isn't useful.
Yeah.
It's a fine line. It's kind of like when you get rejected by a literary journal, for example, there could be a lot of reasons. It could be your theme was just off and they went with a different theme. It could be your writing is just not quite good enough. It could be your writing was horrible. You don't know.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to do your own thinking about it. So the same with when you're in a writer's group, you need to be able to think critically about someone else's writing and about your own writing. And I tell people also, because a lot of times when people are going to argue, what they're going to say is, but it really happened like that, because I'll say, well, what you've written about here is not believable. And they'll say, but it happened like that. And I'll say, that's fine. And I don't really care. But the problem is you've got to show that on the page, because you're not going to be in the reader's bedroom when they're reading it and they're thinking, well, that doesn't make sense to me. You've got to show it and you've got to be intentional about what you're showing. So, yeah.
Yeah. One thing I've come up with, and many years I've done our group, is that people will say, well, I don't like this kind of genre or something,
That's not helpful.
No,
it's helpful.
No, don't say that. If or they just dismiss something, because it's not their cup of tea, and it's like, well, then what are you doing here? Your stuff's not my cup of tea. So what? Right.
Curiosity. You've got to broaden your you can out of it. Everybody's writing is not my cup of tea, but I get what I can. And really, it's not about whether you like the genre or not. It's whether or not the craft elements are working. That's really what you've got to go to the higher plane and say, I'm looking at this as a crafted piece of writing. Right. What can I say about it from that realm?
Another thing that I always want to know from people is, what is their goal with the writing? Are they writing it for their personal benefit? Are they writing it for publication? Are they writing it as, for a specific person, that kind of thing? And that makes a difference. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I want to get the big picture before I don't really want to sit in a group and talk about the tiddly bits, of something. Because most of the time in a group, they're just at the beginning anyway. And so getting too much into the weeds of, word choice or something is just a waste of everyone's time. How much do you allow them to submit for each group?
They can submit up to, for the Dalton group, they can submit up to 2,000 words.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. For my personal writers group, there are just 4 of us and we submit up to 20 pages. Okay. But we only meet once a month.
Right.
Dalton writers group meets twice a month.
Okay. Yeah. That's pretty much what my group does. We say 10 pages, but that's about 2,000 words. Mm-hmm. And but if you get a group like this week, 8 people submitted, that's a lot. That's a lot to read. And
it is a lot. Yeah. We don't always get to everybody, and people have to understand that. And I try to emphasize, you still need to come, even if we might not get to your piece. Mm-hmm. Because you want everybody else to come, when we do get to your piece. Anyway, it goes both ways. You got to be there to give feedback, and if you're going to be there to get feedback. So, yeah.
So many podcasts seem to have a significant question. So here's mine. It's not too elegant. What does the word creativity mean to you personally? And I think you've touched on that a bit already.
Yeah, I think, that is just such a good question. And it's a huge question.
Yeah.
So I'm also a life coach. I don't know if you knew that. I got my life coach certification, which I always hate saying out loud because it just sounds terrible. I'm at the word like people are like, oh my God, they just roll their eyes.
Well, I think the thing is that life coach to a lot of people sounds like you've arrived and you're going to tell people how to live and that kind of thing, which it doesn't. But
yes, or you're just somebody's cheerleader. You're just there going, rah, I'm coaching you on, which is not at all what it is. Life coaching, actually going through life coaching training changed my life immeasurably.
Yeah.
I actually wrote a piece on Medium it was for Better Humans, called How Life Coaching Fixed What Therapy Left Broken. And it was,
wow.
Yeah. Life coaching training taught me in a way that therapy hadn't, that we are the architect of our own fate. But one of the core tenets of life coaching is having curiosity. And it really relates to the whole theme of writing memoir also, where you take a stone and you turn it over and over and you look at it from all angles. And to me, that is exactly what creativity is taking something and taking everything and being curious about it, so that you're not just listening to your own well-versed narrative about a thing, no matter what it is, why I live where I live, why my mother's like she is, why I love dogs, but you're looking at it from all kinds of different angles to find the answers to questions you didn't even know you had. And that to me is the core tenet of creativity.
Wow. Okay. That's great. Okay. I gotta sit on that one and think about it. Yeah, because you're right. It's so easy to think your narrative, your version of your narrative is the right one.
It's not. I mean,
It's
right. Not necessarily. Yeah, it's not necessarily that it's not right. But one of the things that life coaching also does is we ask something called powerful questions, and we talk about, well, what's your story around whatever the thing is that you're thinking about or talking about or worried about. What's your story about that? And the minute you ask yourself what your story is about something, you begin to peel away from your own narrative about it, because you automatically say, oh, this is just a story I'm telling myself in my head. You've heard the phrase, don't believe everything you think. Well, that's absolutely true. Our thoughts are on perpetual loop, and we're like a bowling alley with the gutter. Like our thoughts are constantly falling off into that gutter because we've thought them so much. And so a part of curiosity, a part of creativity, a part of getting to a better place in our own life is stepping away from what we've always told ourselves is true and looking at other possible explanations for things that will take you to a whole other a whole bunch of other places in your life where there are just so many more possibilities. That's why people get so stuck in their lives, is they're just not looking anymore because they think they already know the answers to things. One of the problems I had with therapy, and I'll probably get a lot of blowback about this, and I already have from my article that I've published, but is that the question was always, what's wrong? What seems to be the problem? And the questions you ask in coaching are more of what's possible. Now that you are where you are, what's another way to think about this?
Oh, wow. I'll let you get the dog. Oh. That's, I wondered because when I wrote my dissertation, I got introduced to positive psychology, and I'm not saying that's end all, but it did seem to me up to that point that psychology was all about, I don't know how deviance, but problems, abnormalities and things like that, instead of normality or what's right or what would be better.
Or what would be better. Yeah. What would be better? What's a better way of thinking about this? Or what's a new way of thinking about this? Even if you could come up with a new way, already you're saying, oh, I don't have to think about this in exactly the same way I've always thought about this.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, that's fascinating. So I've had you on here for almost an hour, and so I need to get back to your work. Are you working on a literary project now?
I am. I'm so glad you asked. I am working on a collection of essays called Bedtime Stories for the Invisible, and I am absolutely loving this project. So I've written essays for years and years. That's my form. I mean, I did write my book, The Body Tourist, and that was a whole book. But I'm really an essayist at heart, and I have written them for years. I've submitted them to literary journals for years. A lot of them have been published. And so I'm taking all of the ones that, or a lot of the ones that have been published, and then plus a lot of new ones that I've written that I have not submitted anywhere. And I'm pulling them together into this collection. And what I realized as I was writing, kind of like I realized with Body Tourist, realizing the houses were kind of a narrative theme. When I started looking at my essay writing over time, I realized that invisibility was a narrative theme for my life, for me as a human being, as a woman, as someone who tried to erase myself with anorexia, as someone who has felt chronically unseen in my life. All of my essays, it seemed like, went back to that core issue.
Wow.
And the ones that didn't sort of orbited around it kind of obliquely or, in some way. And so those essays I'm kind of taking and I'm honing them to more clearly express that that theme of invisibility, because it's definitely there in those essays. It just wasn't maybe central, front and center. And so as a whole, the collection will be about all the things that influence us that are invisible or that make us feel invisible in some way. And that can be a lot of things. It can be our marriage making us feel invisible, making us feel, but you know what I mean? Yeah. I say that with air quotes. I just realized your radio people can't see me doing air quotes, but the things that we think are erasing us. For a long time, I thought my marriage was erasing me because I thought it meant I had to merge with my husband and become, Mrs. my husband's last name, the way my mother did. I have tried to erase myself through ultra caring of my dogs. I've had so many dogs with so many problems. And I realized at some point that I was disappearing because everything I was doing was to try to keep these dogs, try to make these dogs immortal. And I couldn't,
Sorry.
So that's just they don't. Yeah. And all the ways, like, for example, my father didn't see me. And the only way my mom saw me was through our shared dieting experiences. So things like that have sort of contributed to my feelings of invisibility. And then the bedtime stories, because it's called Bedtime Stories for the Invisible, comes from the fact that my husband for 30 years told me bedtime stories, these little stories he would make up because I've had a lifetime of insomnia. And he would tell me a little story, like when we would go to sleep or if I wake up in the night, he would make up this story, and they were charming, and they were always like the princess was on her way with her 3 beautiful babies, which were always my dogs, my 3 dogs. I don't have any children. We don't have any children. And they were just charming stories, and they always put me to sleep. And in the end, I always completed some successful journey, to somewhere. That was what all of his stories were. Oh. And I sort of realized through the writing of this book that my journey has been my journey toward feeling visible in my own life. And so that's sort of the whole coming full circle part of it.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
That's the arc.
Okay, fascinating. Well, I have been thrilled to have you on today after all these years.
Yes, thank you so much.
And I just think you have a lot of wisdom to share. And I hope that people hear this and are able to use your advice about the narrative, about their curiosity. And that's really very powerful, as well as writing stuff.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you, Barbara.